From Puerto Rico, and this story first originated in 1995 when the first sightings occurred. This demon appears in the form of a creepy sort of animal that some would liken to a dog, but others describe it as being more lizard or even alien-like. The signature of this horrifying creature is its vampirism, as it likes to drain the blood of livestock, especially goats. It is said to have a forked tongue and large eyes with spikes on its back from the neck to the tip of its tail. It is said that he drinks the blood through 3 holes which he punctures in the shape of a triangle on the animal's neck. It is said, however, that they are afraid of water and that they don't know how to swim, so if you are ever to encounter one, you can use that to your advantage. This is a creature that originated in Japan, with the story coming from the World War II era. Hanako-san is said to be the spirit of a girl who passed away from an airstrike. According to the legends surrounding her, it is said that she can be summoned when you enter the girl's bathroom on the 3rd floor of a building. Once in the bathroom, go to the 3rd stall and knock 3 times and call her name. After this, once you open the stall door, it is said that she will be waiting for you. She appears as a sweet girl, but don't let this fool you. It is said that she actually is there to grab you and drag you to hell through the toilet. Sometimes once you've completed the ritual, when you open the stall door, instead of Hanako-san, you'll find a 3-headed lizard that will condemn you for invading her privacy, and then it will devour you. So really, it's a lose-lose situation no matter what. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Headless Horseman. This is a classic Halloween tale that many of us are likely familiar with. This Halloween sort of figure originated in the 1820 short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was written by author Washington Irving. Little did Washington know that this story and character in particular would go on to have a major influence on pop culture even still. The legend of the Headless Horseman begins in Sleepy Hollow, New York during the American Revolutionary War, and it was here that the horseman was actually a trooper who was killed in the Battle of the White Plains on October 28, 1776. The way he died is quite gruesome, but it is no surprise because, as his name would suggest, he lost his head. While his comrades carried his body off the battlefield, no one was waiting around to collect the pieces of his head. Eventually, when they buried him in the cemetery, he later rose from the dead as a ghost, determined to find his missing head. Some versions of the story have him wielding a jack-o'-lantern as a sort of replacement head. Many versions of this story claim that he rose from the dead on, you guessed it, Halloween, which is exactly why this tale has gone on to become such a classic Halloween story. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Jiangshi. Many different cultures have their own versions of the undead, whether that's something like a vampire character or some sort of zombie. In China, the equivalent is the Jiangshi, which is a creature that is often referred to as a kind of hopping vampire. The Jiangshi, like I just mentioned, they hop around with their arms outstretched, and they are typically depicted wearing official garments from the Qing dynasty, which is where this tale originates from. It is said that the Jiangshi can take someone's life with just one touch as they drain the life force out of you. These guys are usually only out hunting at night, as during the day it is said that they reside in a coffin or another dark place such as a cave. It is said that in order to protect themselves from the Jiangshi, some people will place a slab of wood at the bottom of their door so that the creatures cannot come inside. In our number 6 spot today, we have Philibert. This French legend comes from the time during the French Revolution. At this point, a man named Philibert was a doorman at the Val de Grace Hospital. Philibert wanted a specific liquor that needed to be fetched from the cellar. Unfortunately, he found himself inside of the Paris catacombs while searching for it. He only had one candle and was walking around in the darkness when he realized that he was lost. It is said that Philibert may have also had a few drinks that night beforehand, which I'm sure didn't really help. The candle was blown out, leaving him completely in the dark and unable to find his way out. 11 years later, his body was found, and it was identified by the ring of hospital keys found with him. He was buried in the catacombs in the spot they found his body, with a tombstone describing his death. It is said that every November 3rd, Philibert's ghost comes out to haunt the catacombs. I know, it's not quite Halloween, but it's so close.
At the 5 is the Indiana ice skating explosion. On Halloween night in 1963, an eerily unexpected and catastrophic event transpired at the Indiana State Fairground Coliseum during the Holiday on Ice showcase in Indianapolis. See, what was meant to be an evening of festive entertainment quickly turned into a horrifying nightmare. You see, as the clock ticked past 11 p.m., the bustling atmosphere shifted drastically. Leaking propane gas, unbeknownst to the attendees and performers, erupted into a devastating ice-skating explosion. The force of the blast shattered the tranquility, causing the floor to cave in, leaving behind a haunting immense crater. The calamity claimed the lives of 74 individuals, inflicted injuries upon roughly 400 others. Eyewitness accounts painted a haunting scene, likening it to a ghastly wartime experience. One reporter vividly described the aftermath as a surreal and distressing sight akin to something witnessed on the battlefield. At number 4 is The War of the Worlds. Orson Welles is a visionary actor, writer, and director who orchestrated a radio drama titled The War of the Worlds, which cunningly simulated a Martian invasion through radio announcements. The show was designed to mimic actual breaking news, immersing listeners in a vivid narrative that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The outcome was pandemonium. A large proportion of the audience, unaware of the broadcast's theatrical nature, fell victim to panic, convinced that aliens were actually wreaking havoc in New Jersey. The broadcast's realism was so persuasive that it captured the attention of approximately 12 million listeners, and shockingly, around 1 million of those believed the otherworldly invasion was authentic, and the result was utter chaos. At number 3 is Houdini. So picture this, it's 1926 Halloween night, and Houdini just wrapped up one of his most astounding performances. But it wasn't all smoke and mirrors. See, Houdini was showing some students in Montreal a few tricks of the trade when he dropped a rather bold claim, bragging about how his abs were so rock solid that they could take any punch. Well, the student, likely thinking challenge accepted, sucker punched him right in the gut not once, but twice. Houdini initially brushed it off, but soon he was clutching his stomach in agony. Turns out those punches had ruptured his appendix, leading to a fatal poisoning. But here's where it gets spooky. You see, rumors suggest that it might not have been an accident. Some believe that Houdini was silenced by spiritualists, a group he had been exposing as frauds in his quest to debunk the supernatural. A Halloween trick that went too far, or something more sinister? I'll let you guys be the judge down in the comments. At number 2, that's not a decoration. In 2014, Halloween took a chilling turn when a scene straight out of a horror movie unfolded on a New York street. A man dragging what appeared to be a headless body out of his apartment, kicking the head across the street. People, thinking it was just a macabre yet convincing Halloween setup, chuckled nervously, but as the night wore on, the truth emerged, shattering the assumption that it was all just a spooky spectacle. The decoration turned out to be Patricia Ward, a real person, decapitated by her own son, who struggled with mental health issues. After leaving his mother's body in the street, the night took an even darker turn as he tragically chose to end his life by stepping in front of an oncoming train. At number 1, poisoned candy. Halloween is a night eagerly awaited by kids for the thrill of dressing up and the promise of a bag full of sugary treats, but in 1974, it took a terrifying turn, leaving a lasting mark on the holiday. The culprit was none other than Ronald Clark O'Brien, a figure not from a scary movie, but a real-life horror. Disguised as a caring father out trick-or-treating with the neighborhood kids, O'Brien did the unthinkable. He distributed pixie sticks filled with cyanide to unsuspecting trick-or-treaters, including his own, all while pretending to revel in the Halloween spirit. His motivation was a horrific and twisted plan to claim his son's life insurance money. That's not just a family tragedy, it's a sinister attempt to make an urban legend a reality. This night of innocent fun turned into a night of unimaginable horror, a stark reminder that even in the midst of joy and harmless festivities, there can be genuine danger.
In our number 10 spot, we have War of the Worlds. On Halloween Eve in 1938, people thought that aliens had come to Earth. This story is nuts. In 1938, way before movies and TV shows and radio programs became what they are today, 12 million people tuned into a radio program on CBS radio that declared that Martians have invaded New Jersey. It was a radio play called War of the Worlds by Orson Welles, who acted in it and wrote it. Very few people knew it was a play though, and it created mass hysteria. It is predicted that 1 in 12 people believed it to be real, approximately 1 million were terrified and ran out of their homes and panicked over an alien invasion. But honestly though, that must have been really scary to hear and not know what to do. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 9 spot, we have a fascist celebration. On Halloween in 1922, Mussolini, the Italian politician of the time, threw a party to celebrate the growing power of the fascist party. This happened in Rome with thousands of men who dressed in black shirts, which was a part of the party's uniform. The pictures are insane to see. I've said to myself that if I ever find myself in a place surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people all gathered for the same purpose or person, then I will ask myself, do I think like everyone else here? Have my thoughts been manipulated in some way to appeal to a core basic human need that we all need, which is to be accepted and to belong? I'm sure the answer to the last question will be yes, let's be real. Apparently it was this day that Mussolini violently took control of the government, which led him to becoming prime minister and then the dictator. This event became known as the March on Rome. So yeah, this is definitely some pretty crazy history for the Italians and certainly a terrifying event. In our number 8 spot, we have a terrifying prediction. Apparently, American serial killer David Berkowitz predicted a killing while inside the correctional facility that he was in, and no one, of course, paid attention to it and thought he was making up a story. Typical, but also he was a prisoner, which I'm sure most assumed to be clinically insane, so it makes sense why they wouldn't have listened. They didn't realize until Halloween morning in 1981 when 2 people named Elizabeth Platzman and Ronald Sisman, who were found dead in their Manhattan home, brutally killed. Apparently, Berkowitz described their apartment perfectly and said that a cult had carried out these killings. No one was ever able to find out who killed these people, so many believe Berkowitz's prediction to be true and believe that probably this cult was very powerful and that's why no one was ever found to be connected to the killings. I'm sure that happens way more than we think. In our number 7 spot, we have Nema Louise Carter. In 1977, on Halloween night, a 19-month-old by the name of Nema Louise Carter was stolen from her bed. The windows were locked, and so the parents believed that whoever took her was hiding in her closet. Almost a month later, she was found dead in a refrigerator in an abandoned home. Before this incident, 2 twins from nearby went missing and were found in a refrigerator, and they were believed to have been taken by a woman that ended up being Nema's babysitter. So eventually, with this new evidence, the babysitter by the name of Jacqueline Rubidoux was given a life sentence in prison for the killings. In our number 6 spot, we have Orange Socks. This is a pretty wild story, but a little gruesome, so brace yourself. A woman in her 20s was killed on Halloween night in 1979. She was found severely injured and naked, but the only thing that was on her was orange socks. The police couldn't identify her, so that's how she was given the name Orange Socks. She was found just off of Interstate 35 outside of Georgetown, Texas, where it's possible that a notorious serial killer possibly was. I am referring to Henry Lee Lucas. He eventually confessed to the crime, stating that the girl's name was Joni or Judy. He was sentenced to death for it, but apparently he then retracted the confession in order to get his death sentence suspended. He was apparently notorious for admitting to crimes he didn't commit, so whether he did so or not still remains a mystery.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Lotus Pond. This urban legend starts off with a young couple who were so in love that they planned to run away together and elope. They made a plan to meet at midnight at the Lotus Pond, and from there they would leave and go start their lives together. When the girl showed up at midnight, she waited for so long, but the boy never showed up. She left the pond and went back into town, and this is when she spotted her boyfriend with another woman. She was so heartbroken and upset that she began crying and could not stop. She was so distraught that she went back to the Lotus Pond where they had planned to meet, and here she drowned herself. Months later, another couple had a plan to meet at the Lotus Pond. The boy got to the pond early and was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive when he heard a female voice say, quote, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy was really confused because this wasn't the meeting time that him and his partner had discussed, and he responded, "No." All of a sudden, 2 pale white hands reached out of the water and dragged him under the pond, drowning him. Ever since then, it is said that if you are at the Lotus Pond at midnight and you encounter a girl or hear her voice, do not answer her questions or even look at her, or she will get you too. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Night Hag. The Night Hag is a creature that comes from Brazil. She is a tall, skinny woman with yellow fingernails, white hair, green teeth, red eyes, and an evil laugh. She creeps across rooftops and watches families while they are inside of their homes. She watches the family eat and waits until one of them happens to go to sleep with a stomach full of food. She waits until you're asleep, which is her moment to strike. She will sneak into your bedroom and sit upon your chest so that you are unable to move, and she sits there and waits for her victim to be partly awake but partly still asleep and completely unable to move, which is what some of us would call sleep paralysis. She thrives off of that feeling of helplessness that her victim has, knowing that despite their best attempts, they are unable to move or call for help. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Morgan House. This house is a very popular tourist development in Kalimpong. Its beauty draws a lot of people to the present-day Heritage Hotel. It used to see a lot of large, elegant parties since the beautiful wood and stone structures are the perfect backdrop, but it is now known as a haunted hotel. It is said that the spirit of Lady Morgan never left the house. It was built specifically for Lady Morgan and her husband to get married, but after she died a premature death, Mr. Morgan had to leave the house. The story goes that Lady Morgan was actually harmed by her husband before her death, so it is said that her ghost is rightfully very unhappy. People have reported being able to hear her high-heeled shoes tapping in the corridor when no one else is around. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Woman Without Hands. This story is about a father who gets offered money by a strange man. The man tells the father that if he gives him whatever is standing behind the mill, then he will give him the money. Unbeknownst to the father, this strange man is actually the devil. The man agrees because he believes that there is only an apple tree standing behind the mill, but to his unfortunate surprise, his daughter was actually standing behind it. Yeah, should have double checked first. When the devil goes to take the daughter away, she fights back, and she is so pure that she is able to resist his grip, but the devil still wants to take something with him. He tells the father and daughter that he will leave if the father will chop off his daughter's hands to give to him. Of course, at first they're like, absolutely not, but then the devil threatened to take the father away if they didn't agree. So unfortunately, that father and daughter apparently had no choice, and they were forced to chop off her hands. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Two Realms. To end off this list today, we've got to take it right back to the origins of Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. Legend has it that around this time of year, the veil between our world and the spirit world thins and the two worlds collide. This makes it easier for spirits to cross over to the realm of the living and vice versa. The origins of Halloween date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. This was a year-end celebration 2,000 years ago that marked the end of summer and harvest and marked the beginning of dark, cold winters, which was often a time marked with death. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated because they believed that the ghosts of the dead were returning to Earth. These ghosts would cause trouble, they'd damage crops, but it was also thought that druids, which were Celtic priests, would be able to make predictions for the future. Aside from these ancient origins, there are many other cultures that have similar types of celebrations, believing the same thing, that the veil between the realms has thinned. Coming in at number 10 is the thinning of the veil. The Celts believed that Halloween, known then as Samhain, was the night that the veil between the spirit realm and the living was at its thinnest, allowing spirits and other supernatural forces to descend and cause mischief or harm. To the ancient Celts, people were transformed into cats as punishment for their bad deeds. Now, those unfortunate enough to be cursed by black magic were also turned into cats, particularly black cats. The ancient Celts also felt the need to please the spirits in order to ensure that their population and livestock did not die during the harsh winter. Food and drink were often left for the fairies, and occasionally an animal was sacrificed to appease the spirits. Souls of the departed were believed to revisit their homes seeking hospitality, and in some cases, a place setting of food or drink was put on the dining table in anticipation of the visit. Mumming or wearing disguises were part of the festival and involved people going door to door in costume or disguise, reciting verse in exchange for food. This tradition then transformed into what we now call Halloween. Number 9. Black cats. The idea of being spooked by black cats dates back to the Middle Ages, when these dark felines were considered a symbol of the devil. Now, it didn't help that centuries later, accused witches were often found to have cats, particularly black ones. People began to believe that the cats were witches' familiars, supernatural entities that would assist in their practice of dark magic, or were actually shape-shifting witches themselves. In most Western cultures, black cats have typically been looked upon as a symbol of evil omens, and most of Europe considers the black cat a symbol of bad luck, particularly if one walks across the path in front of a person, which is believed to be an omen of misfortune and death. The black cat in folklore has been able to change into human shape to act as a spy or courier for witches or demons. But in contrast, the supernatural powers ascribed to black cats were sometimes viewed positively. Personally, I see them as a lucky thing, but hey, to each their own. Number 8. Devil's Night. Okay, so it seems like different places have different names for this, but Devil's Night refers to the night before Halloween on October 30th, well, at least where I'm from. It refers to the vandalism and arson of abandoned property during the time before and after Halloween. Now, Devil's Night started many years ago as Mischief Night with mild-mannered pranks such as toilet papering homes or games like Ding Dong Ditch. Now, these pranks, however, evolved into serious acts of vandalism and arson in the 1970s and have continued occurring on the days surrounding the Halloween holiday ever since. Now, Devil Night is believed to have started in Detroit and then quickly spread to other cities along the Rust Belt of the US. With rising unemployment rates, foreclosures, and economic downturns, many buildings in the metro areas were abandoned and left unattended. Now, these former homes became targets for vandals, and in the 1970s to 80s, arson cases in the 3 days and nights surrounding Halloween rose exponentially. Neighbors ended up organizing community watch programs and posted signs on abandoned buildings with the message which read, "This building is being watched," with hopes of deterring vandals. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in my family, we always brought our pumpkins inside that night because we didn't want them to get smashed. Number 7. Crimes. Halloween seems like a perfect time to commit a crime as everyone is dressed up in disguises, and there are many famous crime cases that have happened on Halloween. For example, sometime in the early hours of Halloween 1981, Manhattan couple Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman had their lives ended in their Chelsea apartment. The couple were severely beaten before being shot execution style, with the apartment completely ransacked. A prison informant claimed that one of his fellow inmates had predicted the crime weeks before it actually happened. Now, that inmate turned out to be son of Sam, aka David Berkowitz. David had long been rumored to be involved with a satanic cult that helped him with some of his misdeeds. Now, according to the informant, David had told him that his cult was planning to enter a residence near the Greenwich Village, and Chelsea would qualify for that, on Halloween to carry out a ritual slaying. When questioned, David claimed that Ronald had footage of one of the son of Sam's shootings and was planning to hand it over to the authorities in exchange for dropping some controlled substance charges. While no evidence was found to support David's claims, he was basically right about the description of Ronald's apartment, and the crime is still unsolved. Number 6. Carving jack-o'-lanterns. Fun fact, the tradition of carving jack-o'-lanterns originated in Ireland using turnips instead of pumpkins. Now, it's allegedly based on a legend about a man named Stingy Jack who repeatedly trapped the devil and only let him go on the condition that Jack would never go to hell. But when Jack died, he learned that heaven did not want his soul either, so he was forced to wander the earth as a ghost for eternity. The devil gave Jack a burning lump of coal and a carved out turnip to light his way as he would stay on Earth forever. Now, locals eventually began carving scary faces into their own turnips to frighten away evil spirits, and he became known as Jack of the Lantern or Jack-o'-lantern, hence the name.
In our number 5 spot, we have poisoned candy. Okay, this one might haunt your dreams a little, or at least make you weary about the candy you may eat going forward. There was a young human that went trick-or-treating one Halloween night, and after getting home and beginning to eat his candy, he passed out and died. He of course ate a piece of candy that was poisonous, and that's what killed him. But that's not the worst part. Apparently, this wasn't a fluke. This boy was poisoned by his own father. Apparently his father really needed money, and so he took this as an opportunity to cash out a life insurance policy that he had on his son. Yeah, that is definitely bone chilling. I'm gonna be weary of the candy I eat for the rest of my life going forward now. In our number 4 spot, we have the Hilton surprise. On Halloween morning in 2004, a Hilton employee in Key West, Florida experienced the surprise of her life when she found a newborn dead in a garbage bag. Probably the most horrific thing I have ever heard. It still had its umbilical cord attached. Its mother was most likely a pregnant woman that was seen walking into the hotel with 3 men earlier that morning. A witness overheard moaning in the bathroom and asked if the woman was alright. All 3 of the males waited outside of the bathroom for her, and one of them even called out to her, calling her Samantha or Sonia. That's what the witness said. The woman was in the bathroom for about 40 minutes before she and the 3 men were escorted out by security. She apparently was holding her stomach in pain, but told the guard that she had been partying too hard the night before. She and the men were never found. In our number 3 spot, we have the tragedy on ice. On Halloween night 1963, in a skating rink in Indiana State Fairground Coliseum, Indianapolis, a tragedy occurred around 11 p.m. that night. It was apparently the last skating routine of the show when the concession stand exploded and the floors caved in, which caused a crater. Gas had been leaking from the concession stand, and that is what led to the explosion. 74 people died and 400 were injured from the event. It was said that the aftermath was a nightmare to see. I can only imagine. In our number 2 spot, we have Stephen Damman. It was Halloween in 1955, and a woman by the name of Marilyn Damman took her son Stephen and her daughter Pamela to a supermarket in East Meadow, New York. She left her son and daughter outside while she was shopping. It was the 50s, so I guess that was normal then. Comment below if you were alive then and can confirm that this was normal, because it doesn't seem normal. Especially if one of them is still in a stroller, and Stephen was. When she finally left the store, she discovered that they were missing. She eventually found her daughter, but she never found Stephen. Apparently during this time, it was common that people were taken by people that couldn't procreate, and they were given different names. Even still today, a body hasn't been found, and so it is believed that Stephen is out there somewhere, just living someone else's life. Whoa, imagine. In our number 1 spot, we have Harry Houdini's death. Okay, I know what you might be thinking, Melissa. Harry Houdini's death is not terrifying. No, I suppose not. I mean, perhaps for his family it might have been terrifying, but what could potentially be terrifying about his death is the possibility that he was actually magical. Out of the 365 days in a year that he could have passed away, of course it's on Halloween, the Day of the Dead, the witch's holiday, a magical night. I don't know, is this a coincidence? Possibly, but I think not. Some people think he was killed by the Spiritualists, an organization he would apparently try to debunk, but there's seemingly no proof of this.
At number 10. The son of Sam predicts an unaliving. Back in 1981, Halloween brought more than just spooky costumes and candy. It bore witness to a chilling event that still sends shivers down our spines. Imagine this, a prediction of an unaliving made by none other than David Berkowitz, famously known as the son of Sam, while he was serving time at the high-security Attica Correctional Facility. Berkowitz foretold a haunting narrative of a cult-driven unaliving, a tale that was initially dismissed as fiction until it materialized into a real horror story. During the eerie early hours of that Halloween morning, within a Manhattan home, the lives of Ronald Sisman, 39, and Elizabeth Platzman, 20, met a tragic and violent end. They were savagely beaten, fatally shot, mirroring Berkowitz's detailed description of the apartment layout and the involvement of a cult. The bone-chilling aspect is that the unaliving eagerly aligned with Berkowitz's narrative, which remains an unsolved mystery. Whether it was an uncanny coincidence or a bone-chilling premonition remains a haunting question that still sends shivers down our collective spines. And number 9 is the trick-or-treat unaliver. Ever thought Halloween was just about harmless scares and fun costumes? Well, let me tell you about a bone-chilling event from 1957. Picture this, it's a quiet Halloween night, shattered by an unaliving that unfolded like a scene from a thriller. You see, Peter Fabiano, a seemingly regular guy in California, was shot with a pew-pew at point blank in a horrifying trick-or-treat unaliving. The plot thickens with a tangled web of relationships. You see, the prime suspect, Joanne Rebel, was entangled in a love triangle involving Fabiano's wife, Betty. The motive was jealousy. See, Rebel felt scorned and hatched a plan to eliminate Fabiano. The story takes a sinister turn as Rebel manipulated Goldine Prizer into executing the fatal shot. Dressed in a disguise, Pizer pulled the trigger, believing she was under Rabel's control due to a supposed spell. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna hold up in court. Their crime was discovered when an anonymous tip led police to a hidden pew-pew. The ladies were caught, confessed, and ended up serving time for their chilling act. And number 8 is the Cradle Snatcher. On an eerie Halloween night in 1997, something terrifying unfolded. Nima Louise Carter inexplicably vanished from her locked room, her empty cradle a haunting mystery. A month passed before the grim discovery shook her town. Her body was discovered in a long-abandoned house's refrigerator. But the horror didn't begin and end there. You see, a year earlier, 2 twins fell victim to a similar chilling abduction, lured out of their home and trapped in a refrigerator, identifying their babysitter as the malevolent force behind the ordeal. And shockingly, the very same babysitter later emerged in connection to Nemo's case, yet never faced conviction. The babysitter was eventually charged for the twins' unaliving, serving a life sentence, but maintained an eerie silence about Nima's tragic fate. At number 7, a prank gone wrong. Halloween is a time when the line between playful and the pearliest blurs, which showcases an unsettling reality beyond mere ghost stories and spooky costumes. In a chilling incident back in '98, the Bronx became a stage for a horrifying event. Picture this: a man simply waiting in his car to pick up his girlfriend's son from a joyous Halloween gathering, but out of the night, a group of rowdy teens appeared, bombarding the vehicle with eggs and sparking a tense altercation. Now, seemingly pacified, the man returned to his car, only for the situation to take a dark turn. In a sudden tragic twist, one of the teenagers drew a weapon and fatally shot the man in the noggin. At number 6 is a plea for help. This dude from Oregon was unboxing Halloween decorations only to stumble upon a plea for help, a chilling letter seemingly penned by a Chinese labor camp inmate. It detailed the harsh conditions of their imprisonment, sparking international concern. This wasn't your typical Halloween scare, it was a real-life horror story. The investigation into this revelation highlights the dark side of production processes, drawing attention to the forced labor allegations. You see, China's labor camps, where individuals are detained without trial for minor infractions, are under the spotlight. And this isn't an isolated incident either. Reports of labor conditions at Chinese factories have triggered global scrutiny. Instances like the Foxconn strikes and the previous worker unalivings have led to reevaluations of the workplace regulations. Halloween might seem spooky, but real-life horrors like these paint a much scarier picture.
Number 5, bobbing for apples. Okay, so this isn't as terrifying, but I wanted to mention it nonetheless. The game of bobbing for apples has been a staple at Halloween parties for many years, but its origins are more rooted in love and romance. The game traces back to a courting ritual that was part of a Roman festival honoring Panoma, the goddess of agriculture and abundance. While multiple versions existed, the gist was that young men and women would be able to predict their future relationships based on the game. When the Romans conquered the British Isles in 43 AD, the Panoma festival blended with the similarly timed Samhain, a precursor to Halloween. Now, it was said when playing this game, whoever successfully bit into an apple first would be the first person in their group of friends to get married. Sometimes girls would even follow another superstition surrounding the game, which claimed that if they put the apple they bit under their pillow at night, they would see who their true love was in a dream. Now, that's just cute. Number 4, trick-or-treating. So there's much debate around the origins of trick-or-treating, but generally there are 3 theories. The first theory suggests that during Samhain, Celtic people would leave out food to appease the spirits traveling the earth at night. Over time, people began to dress as these unearthly beings in exchange for similar offerings of food and drink. The second theory speculates that the candy bond stems from the Scottish practice of guising, which is a secular version of souling. During the Middle Ages, generally children and poor adults would collect food and money from local homes in return for prayers for the dead on All Souls Day. Geysers dropped the prayers in favor of non-religious practices, with the inclusion of songs, jokes, and other tricks. Now, a third theory argues that modern American trick-or-treating stems from bells nickeling, a German-American Christmas tradition where children would dress in costume and then call on their neighbors to see if the adults could guess the identities of the disguised. In one version of the practice, the children were rewarded with food or other treats if nobody could identify them. But hey, getting free candy sounds good to me. Number 3, witches. America's witch scare, which culminated in the infamous Salem witch trials, were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused and 30 people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by hanging. Now, women vastly outnumbered the men in the ranks of the accused and executed. According to author Carol F. Carlson's The Devil in the Shape of a Woman, 78% of 344 alleged victims in New England were female. And even when men faced allegations of witchcraft, it was typically because they were somehow associated with an accused woman. Women held a precarious, mostly powerful position within the deeply religious Puritan community. The Puritans thought women should have babies, raise children, manage household life, and model Christian subservience to their husbands. Recalling Eve and her sinful apple, they also believed that women were more likely to be tempted by the devil. So when women were not behaving, they'd be accused of being a witch. It was incredibly misogynistic and a dark time in history. Number 2. Bad candy. Every time I finished trick-or-treating, my parents made me dump out all my candy so they could check for anything bad like needles, open candy, or drugs. Now, was this something just made up for fear-mongering, or did our parents just want to steal some of our candy? Well, it turns out there's some truth behind this. On Halloween 1974, Timothy O'Brien ate some Halloween candy that was spiked with cyanide. Now, to be fair, it was his father who spiked the candy, motivated by the huge life insurance on his son. But razor blades, sewing needles, and even poison have been found in candy, as police forces across North America have reported cases of these objects in treats for decades. The first report of Halloween treats being tampered with in North America was in 1959. That Halloween, a California dentist named William Shy distributed 450 laxative-laced candies, which resulted in 30 people falling ill. He was later charged with outrage of public decency and unlawful dispensing of drugs. Another high-profile case made headlines in 1964 when a 47-year-old mother in Greenlawn, New York named Helen Fell handed out bags of treats containing arsenic-laced ant traps, metal mesh scrubbing pads, and dog biscuits. Now, almost all tampering cases involve sharp objects rather than poisoning, and 3/4 of them resulted in no injuries, and the rest only resulted in minor injuries. No trick-or-treaters have ever died by eating a Halloween candy from a stranger, so that's good. And fun fact, trick-or-treating skyrocketed in popularity by the 1950s when Halloween became a true national event. Today, over 179 million Americans celebrate the holiday and spend about $9.1 billion annually in the process. And coming at number 1 is real Halloween decorations. Do you ever see someone's house decorated for Halloween and go, wow, those decorations are so good and look so realistic? Well, what if I told you that some decorations look so realistic because they are real? In 2015, an Ohio community was left in shock after a woman who had her life ended and was found hanging from a fence was mistaken for a Halloween decoration. Then in 2009, the porch of Mustafa Muhammad Zaid displayed a corpse around Halloween time. Now, his neighbors were impressed, but seeing how no one rang his doorbell to check up on him or asked where he purchased the prop, no one could tell that it was indeed their dead neighbor's body. When reported to police, it was discovered that Zaid was dead and rotting on his own porch with a gunshot wound to the head lodged in his eye socket. Now, 2014 was another bad year for convincing Halloween decorations, as when a man dragged a headless body out of his apartment and kicked the head onto the other side of the street, people thought it was a Halloween prank. Now, the truth only came to light later when a person tried to move the dead body out from the middle of the street and realized it was a real person. Not to mention all the hanging bodies over the years that people thought were decorations but were indeed real people. There are so many cases of this, and it is so disturbing.
Starting us off at number 10 is costume or reality. Halloween Day 1957. Betty Fabiano and her husband Peter were winding down and getting ready for bed when the doorbell rang. Despite it being past 11 PM, they assumed that maybe it was a group of late-night trick-or-treaters, and since they had some candy left, and so Peter went downstairs to answer the door and was greeted with a man wearing a mask. Betty heard some muffled voices downstairs, kind of like a man was impersonating a woman's voice, then a pop, and then a thumb. She ran downstairs to discover Peter lying on the ground in a pool of blood with a gunshot wound on his chest. He died on the way to the hospital, and suspects were hunted down immediately. Now, here is like the biggest plot twist of plot twist history. Now, the couple had their fair share of trouble, and while separated at one point, Betty started seeing a woman called Joan. That's not the plot twist, by the way. They decided to take another jab at their marriage, and Peter's only condition was that Betty could never see or speak about Joan again, to which she agreed. Joan obviously then had a motive and was questioned, and things she was saying just weren't adding up. She claimed that she was home all night, but neighbors claimed she left on a drive for a very long time. An anonymous tip led the police to the murder weapon, and then the assailant, 40-year-old Goldine Pizer. She admitted to killing Peter under the spell of a woman she was in love with, and that woman was Joan. Now, coming in at number 9 is Don't Touch My Candy, Halloween Day 2011. A 55-year-old man residing in Chicago realized at 2:30 PM that his bag of candy was missing. Call the police. Now, I don't know if that's referring to his bag of candy that he got during trick-or-treating or the bag he was using to give candy to kids. I mean, you could be 50 and trick-or-treating. I'm not gonna judge you. Who am I to judge you? Either way, suddenly outraged by this realization, the man blamed his neighbor Maria Adams for stealing it, even though she really didn't. The man grabbed a bunch of steak knives from his kitchen and headed to her house, where he ended up stabbing her countless times. Maria desperately tried to defend herself by throwing plates at him, but it was just no use. She was in critical condition by the time she got to the hospital and ended up dying the next morning. The man was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated domestic battery. Can we just take a second, please, to just realize how ridiculous this is? Like, I simply just do not get it. He killed a woman over a bag of candy. Like, unless that bag had the secret of life in it or the elixir of immortality, it's just not that deep. Get a new bag. At number 8 we have the disappearance, Halloween Day 1955. Mother of 2 Marilyn Damon stopped at a food fair on Long Island to do a quick bit of shopping. She left 2-year-old Stephen and 7-month-old Pamela outside the store and told Stephen to watch his little sister. First of all, a 2-year-old cannot be left alone to watch anyone else. Like, that is still baby as hell. Like, what are you doing? 10 minutes later she came out and both children were nowhere to be found. Freaking the hell out, Marilyn starts looking everywhere and thankfully finds Pamela nearby, still in her stroller unharmed, but Stephen was still nowhere to be found. 5,000 people searched for him the next day, but detectives and police were never able to solve the case or find him. Honestly, I feel bad about it, I really do, but also you can't leave your kids alone ever, especially if they're that young. Like, a 2-year-old can't even defend themselves from anyone, how are they meant to defend their younger sibling as well? Like, Marilyn, you should have known better. 2 years old! What can you even do at 2 years old? Nothing! Can you even walk? No, you probably can. You know what I mean, it's young. Now, filling on number 7 slot is The Note, Halloween Day 2012. Now, Julie Keith was on her way to Kmart to buy some quick last-minute cheap Halloween decorations in her hometown of Damascus, Oregon. That was a lot to say in one breath. Either way, inside the graveyard kit that she purchased, she found a handwritten letter from an inmate at the Chinese labor camp that had made the kit. The letter pleads for the reader to send it to the World Human Rights Organization because thousands of people were suffering in China. The writer claimed that them, along with a lot of other workers in the Massanjia labor camp, were forced to work 15-hour days with no weekends or holidays. If they refused, they would get tortured or beat and only got paid 10 yuan a month, which is about $1.61 a month. A month! The letter wasn't signed, but Julie did pass it on to the organization and Kmart launched their own investigation into it as well. Thankfully, months later the labor camp was exposed and the inmates were freed. Woohoo, we love a happy ending! Now at number 6 is The Prank Gone Wrong, Halloween Day 1998. 21-year-old Carl Jackson was driving through the Bronx with his girlfriend to pick up her son from a Halloween party. While stopped at an intersection, a bunch of teenagers started throwing eggs at his car, and so he got out to confront them. No one's about to throw eggs at me when my girl's in the car. I'll front on them. I'll square up. That's me as Carl. Either way, one of the teens, 17-year-old Curtis Sterling, pulled out a handgun and straight up shot Carl in the head, killing him instantly. And egging people on Halloween is quite a common prank, but it's gone awry so many times. Curtis ended up being sentenced to 20 years in prison, and every year on Halloween he gets a card from Carl's mother saying, "I'm glad you're still there." And honestly, kudos to her, I would do the exact same thing. What a senseless, unnecessary killing. Like, I'm getting mad at this list, I really am. It's pissing me off.
Right, next up at number 2 now, we have the egging. As long as trick or treating has been around, so has egging. If some kids don't get what they want on Halloween, they throw eggs at people. It's not nice, but it still happens. That is what happened to Carl Jackson on Halloween 1998. On that night, he was driving with his girlfriend to pick up her son from a kids party. He drove past some teenagers who threw eggs at his car. Carl got out and started arguing with them, understandably so. He got back into the car, one of the teenagers then pulled out a gun and shot him once in the head, killing him. 17-year-old Curtis Jackson was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Every single Halloween he gets a card delivered to him in prison. It's from Carl's mother and simply reads, "I'm glad you're still there."
Coming in at number 5 is The Mailman, Halloween Day 2012. Halloween is always a lit time, it's very scary to the point some people claim they get scared to death. Exaggeration. Pussies. Now, a mailman in Denver was on his route making his deliveries and he showed up at one house that had a corpse decoration on its porch. Sort of annoyed at the placement of the decoration, he sort of sidestepped it out of the way to the side and delivered the mail. As he was walking away, he realized it wasn't a decoration from any angle. It was a real man that was dead. Turns out the dead man, Delport, had collapsed and died on his porch when returning from his night shift, but because of the timing of Halloween, it just didn't look sus. Honestly, you guys, imagine dying and someone thinking you're a Halloween decoration and just moving your body to the side. Like, biggest L I'd ever take, and I'm not even bloody alive. That's the biggest L. At number 4 is the costume gone wrong. Wow, I need to think of better names because I already did prank gone wrong. Sorry about that. Either way, Halloween Day 2012. An 8-year-old girl was so excited to dress up for Halloween in her hometown in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. She was at a relative's bonfire that night and went to play on the hillside when her aunt Janet saw her in the bushes. Assuming she was a skunk because of her black outfit, hat, and white tassel, she asked her son to shoot the pest. So Thomas went in and got the gun and shot the girl in the shoulder and abdomen. As soon as they realized the grave mistake that had happened, she was helicoptered to Pittsburgh Children's Hospital straight away. She remained in critical condition but did actually survive. What a close call. Like, oh my god, I would have never been able to live with that if I was Thomas or Janet. Like, killing my relative because I thought they were a skunk? Ugh, that would have been an even bigger L. Such an L. Filling our number 3 slot is Bad Candy, Halloween Day 1974. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien was going trick-or-treating with his dad and sister in Pasadena, Texas. They got to a house where no one answered the door, and getting impatient, the kids ran off to the next house while their dad Ronald stayed behind. He re-emerged a few minutes later with a few pixie sticks, saying the person did come out and give it to him for his kids and their friends. They went home and Timothy had his pixie stick and started complaining that his stomach was hurting. Then he ran to the bathroom vomiting and convulsing and eventually went limp in his dad's arms and died on the way to the hospital. Turns out the pixie sticks he had a lethal dose of potassium cyanide in it. The police then went into panic mode trying to locate the other kids that had those same pixie sticks, and thankfully none of the other kids had ended up eating them, but they were all found with enough cyanide in them to kill 3 to 4 adults. In each one, not even all together. Ronald was never suspected until the investigation revealed he was over $100,000 in debt and could never hold down a job. He had 21 in the past few years. 21 jobs? What the hell? Turns out he had taken out a total of $60,000 worth of life insurance on his kids, which his wife was unaware of. He ended up killing his son to get the insurance and gave the candy to the other kids as well, just to lessen suspicion. You are complete and ultimate trash if you murder a family member, especially your own kid. Like, getting triggered. Stop getting triggered. Now at number 2 is Heads Will Roll, Halloween Day 2014. So Halloween decorations are always a good time, and that night a man was seen dragging a headless body out of his apartment and just leaving it on the street. Just casual, really. He came back out a few minutes later with the head and then proceeded to kick it to the other side of the street. And I know you're probably wondering what the hell onlookers thought of this, and most of them just thought it was a prank or that the man didn't want to use the decoration anymore. Either way, it was only an hour or so later when someone actually tried to move the body from the middle of the street did they realize the decoration wasn't a decoration. It was a real decapitated body. Turns out the body was Patricia Ward's, and her murderer was her son, who had a history of mental illness. He decapitated her, left her body on the street, and then killed himself by jumping in front of a train. This just ended well for no one, not Patricia, not her son, and not the person who moved her body. Like, no. Not happily ever after. And finally, at number 1 is The Cradle Snatcher, Halloween Day 1977. George Carter had just put his 19-month-old Nima into her crib in their home in Oklahoma. The next morning, he woke up to find the child missing from her cradle, despite all the windows and doors being locked. It's believed the abductor was hiding in her closet that night and snuck the child out when the parents fell asleep. A month later, a group of kids playing in an abandoned house 4 blocks away from the Carter home were horrified when the decomposed body of an infant came tumbling out of the house's fridge. That child ended up being Nima, but it doesn't even end there. Now, before the Carters lived in that house, it was home to another family that had 2 twin daughters. The year beforehand, the 3.5-year-old girls were stolen and lured out of their house in broad daylight. They were taken to a house by their frequent babysitter, 17-year-old Jacqueline Rubidoux, who told them to get in the fridge and that their aunt would come get them later for some ice cream. A few days later, cries were heard from the fridge by a few children playing in the house next door, so they went inside the house to find out what it was. One of the children opened the fridge door to find Tina jumping out at them. She had managed to stay alive by breathing through a hole in the fridge, but her twin had died from asphyxia. And you know who else called on Jacqueline to watch their child? Nima's parents. Tina even told officers that Jackie Boo was the one who took them to the house, but it failed to lead to a conviction because there was no physical evidence, despite her being shady as hell and the child literally identifying her. But let's just not believe her, shall I? Let's just not believe her.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about mysterious doors that have been sealed for centuries and what lies behind them. Let's take a peek behind these doors and find out why they were sealed once and for all. Click the video now to find out more.